All right, greetings. Um, let's try to do a video because I know we're going to be missing in class, and I'm going to explain the literature review to everybody. Let me take this off. I'm in my office right now, down on the downtown campus. I know this is not an ideal office space for my students on main campus, but don't worry about it. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about the literature review assignment. So literature review assignment is really the first step in your paper. So you have the research question. You should have the research question. I've offered feedback on that to help you move forward. For some of the comments I left for some of the students that you should probably revisit some of those questions after the literature review is done. But there are two literature review paths for you, depending on what type of research you would like to do. If you want to do quantitative, I'll explain that. If you want to do qualitative, I'll explain that. So first things first, what I would like you to do is I want you to start with your research question. So if you're quantitative, the goal is to create a hypothesis. So check out your book, and there's some recommendations for how your hypothesis should be phrased. If you need help with that, please feel free to stop by and visit me during office hours, which occurs an hour before your class, or you can even drop in on Monday evenings from 4 to 5. It's not Monday afternoons, actually. And if you're watching this video for another semester, I don't believe that this will change in future semesters of this course, but just drop by my office hours and we can talk about the hypothesis and how you might go about phrasing your hypothesis. So what I would like you to do is I would like you to start doing some preliminary research. So the example that I use in the sheet is, say that my study is concerned with opinion leaders and the media diets and their information-seeking behavior. So my hypothesis might be something like participants with data-driven information-seeking behaviors have a media diet that utilizes multiple mediums. So this is going to require me to define a couple things. So first thing I might need to define is information-seeking behaviors. I've listed a example of an annotation that you might use, but I found this source, Human Information Behavior, and they offer a definition. Below every citation, I would like you to write at least a few sentences, perhaps 3 to 5 would be the lower end, but a little paragraph that explains what you took away from the article and maybe what definition you're going to use. And that would be one annotation, one entry in your annotated bibliography for information-seeking behavior. You should seek to define these concepts for your hypotheses because your hypothesis is operationalizing the study. Again, let's go back to that. Participants with data-driven information-seeking behaviors have a media diet that utilizes multiple mediums, right? So, well, data-driven, what does that mean? So let's go here, and data-driven, I pulled up an article here. If you keep following down the list, please excuse me, I'm trying to figure out how to create a screen capture, and I was unable to do that, and I don't want to waste all my time trying to figure that out here. But there's an article that I post basically about creating an understanding of data literacy for a data-driven society. In that article, they offer an understanding of what data-driven means, right? So you would list the citation of that article, and then you would offer a brief summary of the article and perhaps a definition again. So that would be data-driven. So now let's go back to the hypothesis again. Participants with data-driven information-seeking behavior. So data-driven is defined, information-seeking behaviors are defined, and then a media diet that utilizes multiple mediums. So we go down, and I found an article here. This is the third article listed in the example of what measuring media diets might look like. So this article is measuring media diets in a high choice environment, testing the listing frequency technique. So I would cite that, and then I would again offer a blurb. Now all pieces of my hypothesis have been defined. At minimum, for my hypothesis, I needed 3 articles to be able to successfully do that. Those 3 articles would count towards your overall annotated bibliography. Now, the literature review is just an annotated bibliography. You're not writing anything beyond just summaries of the articles. Now, let's go down to what I'm expecting for the step 2 of the quantitative. You should identify important areas of your study that will require some background information. So, I say this will help inform the reader of your research paper, and this literature will inform you as you begin to analyze your data. For instance, if my hypothesis is filling a gap in literature, maybe the media diets on information-seeking behavior, or nobody's ever looked at media diets, right? And their role in information-seeking behavior, that might be an area where you fill the gap. So you might want to offer a study of that. Perhaps you've read 4 articles that talk about information-seeking behavior, and you've learned that there is a significant gap, and that will be an important part of your final research paper. You can cite those, and you can say, my study here, my research paper attempts to fill this gap that has been left in the literature, right? Perhaps you want to look at data journalism. Maybe there has not been many examples of data journalism that are informing, that have been informed by public relations research. Maybe there's not a significant number of studies that have looked at the role of data journalism and media diets, right? Where does data journalism fall into the media diet? You might spend the rest of your sources just looking at data journalism. Whichever approach you want to take is fine. So let me use another example. My hypothesis is one. It's very specific. It's very specific to this. But for instance, say we were studying violence on television, right? This example comes up a lot in your textbook. Say we were studying violence on television, and you wanted to understand a little bit more about what studies have been done. You can look into cultivation theory. You can say there's a theory called cultivation theory, which looks at violence on television. You might want to look at agenda setting and the role of violence and our accepted forms of violence in society from a agenda setting standpoint. You might want to look at diffusion of innovations in promoting a program or a technology and innovation, a conflict resolution program that has been promoted to maybe a violent region of the world, okay? That might be various subjects. Now let's go down to the overall project so I can give you the general requirements, and then we'll move into the qualitative research. Every literature review, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, is going to require 10 entries in your annotated bibliography. For my quantitative folks, your hypothesis research will contribute to that 10 entries. I want you to follow the instructions listed under your respective research approach. So if you're doing quantitative, follow the instructions that I just detailed. If you're doing qualitative, follow the instructions that I just detailed. Each blurb should be roughly 1 paragraph in length. The better the summary, the easier it will be to use these sources in your final paper. Please use correct citations. Again, I'm not concerned with your citational style. So if you want to use MLA, cool. If you want to use Chicago, fine. You want to use APA, fine. Whatever will work for you, whichever you know the best is probably the best one to use, but please use a style so I can follow along with it. At the bottom of the literature review, you should either list a hypothesis or a revised research question. So for my quantitative folks, you will be advancing a hypothesis that stems from your research question. For my qualitative folks, we'll talk about this in a second, you will revise your research question to make it easier to do your study. Now for my qualitative folks, let's go back up the document. The qualitative literature review is not much different, okay, from the what I say is the latter requirement, or the second requirement for the quantitative one. Basically, I want you to know different areas of your research question. So say your research question was, I want to know the motivations and aspirations of a community like Winter Park, okay? So say there were a group of studies that looked at the political aspirations of small communities, maybe large and middle-sized cities across America, and you just wanted to look at civic engagement studies on civic engagement, and what those said about the people and why they attended community meetings. That would be appropriate. You could understand what their motivations are. So, if I were to do, and you can't see this, but I'm going to go to Google Scholar real quick, and I'm going to type civic engagement issues. Okay. So there is a study here called Youth Civic Engagement, Normative Issues. Normative task and choosing and transmitting values to citizens. I don't want something quite like that. Issues of conceptualization and measurement. Advances in civic engagement research, issues of civic measurement and civic context, development of civic engagement, theoretical and methodological issues. Maybe issues is not the good search term here. Civic engagement and community conflict. Let's just look at that. Let's see what this says. Adolescent civic engagement and perceived political conflict, the role of family cohesion, education for peace, content, form, and structure, mobilizing youth for civic engagement. This looks like a good one. Say that there was an issue where there was violence in the community, and one of the issues that civic engagement, the students, the youth picked up was violence in the community. This is an issue that you might want to learn, but civic engagement would be a starting point. You can do some research, find some relevant articles, and say maybe that consumes 4 or 5 articles, okay? Good. So we have begun there. That is going to be the beginning of your research. Again, say you want to know more about data journalism and the role of data journalism in forming civic participation, or civic participation and data journalism. Let's see if there's anything there. Data journalism beyond legacy media, the case of African and European civic technology organizations. Let's see what this is. This looks promising. Let me see here. The abstract research has paid relatively little attention to 2 aspects that are increasingly important in understanding data journalism as a maturing field. Journalism today is increasingly provided by a diverse set of actors inside and outside legacy media, and legacy media would be like NBC, New York Post. Data journalism has become a global phenomenon that cannot be fully grasped within national context. Our article brings both of these aspects together and investigates the roles and practices of peripheral actors in European and African contexts. We engage with the research on the role of nonprofits and civic technologists in journalism to interrogate further the entanglements between civic technology organizations and data journalism. This looks like a good article. So you can bring this in, and maybe this will constitute another maybe 4 or 5 articles. And then maybe you just need some background. Maybe you would like to know more about information seeking. Maybe information seeking you deem to be an important part of your study. You might not. I mean, that's what I consider to be an important part of the study that I will be conducting. But maybe you want to look into information seeking behaviors, and maybe you want to include that in your literature review. It's up to you. The literature review is giving you a jump start towards the end of the semester, when you are going to have to put together a research paper, and it's going to have to be informed. Your introduction should be informed by sources. You can't dive into a study without having any kind of background research done. And the sooner you do it, the better, because that's going to help you when you're crafting your research proposal. So that's it. That's the literature review. I did expand the due date to this. I think it will be due in 2 weeks from now, 2 Sundays from now. I think 17th. So you guys have 2 weeks. It shouldn't be too difficult. Again, bring in 10 articles that are relevant and offer a summary of those articles. So that is it. Again, I'm open for any questions that you may have. Thank you so much.